All right, now let's make another common graph for numerical data. So one type of common graph for numerical data is the box plot because it does help you with quartiles. It's like a user-friendly type of graph. But another type of, like you could say 25% of the data is between 55 and 70. 25% of the data is between 70 and 75. 25% of the data is between 75 and 80, and 25% of the data is between 80 and 85. And oh yeah, there's just barely an upper outlier, and there's a heck of a lot of lower outliers. The data is fairly symmetric except for all those lower outliers. Okay, but another common graph is to get a more exact picture of the speeds. So let's highlight that. We're going to insert. We're going to go back to this button, which is used for for numerical data. And we're going to make a histogram. Now, I'm not in love with Excel's histograms for a couple of reasons. Well, a main reason, but we're going to go with it. So the first thing let's do, now we have stuff on both the vertical and horizontal axes. We have to label those. So we're going to label axes. We have to do both of them. Okay, whoops, there we go. So down here, we are graphing the velocities. And then this is telling me how many I have at each velocity. So we have, that's called the frequency or the count. So what is the count at each velocity? All right, so when you're clicking off it, nothing's highlighted. When you click back on it, we get this chart design button. You can actually like play with a lot of these things. It's fun. You can play a long time with this. I'm going to click off it and just go back and do some things that really are important to me. So first of all, let's click on the bars. Okay, when you click on the bars and you go here, the gap width, I want to be 0. If you increase that, it puts gaps between the bars. We do not want gaps between the bars in the histogram. It's an annoying thing about Excel because look, this bar goes up to 73 and this one starts at 73, so that should be 0. So we got to make sure that is 0. Often it is by default, sometimes it's not. I personally like to see my bars separated. So I've clicked on the bars. I'm going to go to Paint. For the borders, I like to see a solid line. That looks a little heavy. Let me see. Let's see what 0.75 does. How does it look? Oh, and let me change the color of the bar because I'm also graphing the same data. If I make different graphs for the same data, I like to use the same color. So we'll solid fill that with this burnt orange. Okay, let's click off it and see how that looks. I like it though, like I'd like the bars to maybe, the separation to be even more dramatic. So I'll click on the bars again, go back to Paint, go to the border solid line. I'm going to put that up to 1 point, maybe 1.5, and I'll go to 1 point and see how I like that. Okay, very good. Now, this says this bar is for all the, oh, we need to put a title. Again, this is visualization of pitch velocities. This lower bar is from 37 to 41.5. This one's from 41.5 to 46. So let me click on this horizontal axis. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to right click and I'm going to format the axis. And then you can talk about bin width. I am not loving these 0.5s here. It just looks messy. I would rather have those be whole numbers. So I'm going to go to 4, or you could go to 5. If I go to 4, there'll be more bars. Let's see if we like it. Okay, and if you went to 5, there would be less bars. So that looks okay. Let's format the axis. And again, if you don't, let me get out of this. If you want to make simple changes, that plus, like the axes, that's what we clicked. If you want to get rid of the grid lines, you can do this. Let's look at data labels. Play with data labels. So if you do data labels, you can label outside the end, so it's labeling the count. So I think that looks fine. There are lots of options, but what this is saying is that there's 205 data points that are in the interval from 73 to 77. And there's 41 data points that are in this interval from 49 to 53. And we see this big gap, which is making you think, doesn't it sort of look like middle school, high school, college, major league? Like when we get down to bivariate numerical and graphical analysis instead of univariate, we'll really pick that up. But that's what this is showing me, is that there is some grouping and we need to analyze these groups. So we have a lot more data analysis to do. But labeling those bars is helpful, and you can choose, do you want to label them on the top, or do you want to label them inside? In the center, I think I'm going to do the outside end. I like that one. And you can do a lot of specialization. I like to click on that. I do like to put borders around my graphs, so I'm going to do that. And I do like to bold my titles, so I'm going to do that. Okay, now, if you wanted to, just to show you, let's go back to the box plot. The box plot, let's hit the plus. Let's look at the data labels for the box plot. Do you see how it's labeling? You can choose, we're choosing to the right. It's labeling all of these quartiles along with all of the outliers. It's a little bit intense with the outliers. I think I'm going to get rid of that and just let us go without that. But you can add that. There's a lot of specialization you can do. But here we see that there's, a lot of this data is happening right here. This data is happening right here. But do you see how like this is spread out? Everything below 37, everything below 55 is an outlier. So anything from like here down, we've got a lot of outliers. So we have a lot of outliers in this data set to take care of. So we definitely do not have a symmetric data set. And so looking at this data set by only looking at an average is not a great idea, because we really miss that there's groupings of this data set. Proper data analysis here is going to really have to delve into what these groups are.